Jane, you make the best cup of tea in the world. How'd you do?
Miss, excuse me, please.
You know, my Terry, he always compliments me on a perfect cuppa.
Miss, excuse me.
It's the PG, really. There's no other tea to beat PG.
Excuse me, miss. Miss, anyone?
Can I help you?
I forgot what I come for.
Swatch. I want my Swatch. Give me some time. Swatch. I want my
If your family's a little on the large side, don't worry. So's the new 9-roll pack of Andrex.
I'd like to make a bit of a fuss when we've gone all that way to see her.
Yes, we really ought to go more often.
Here, Brian, I can smell gas.
It's really strong in here.
I'll turn it off at the mains. You better open a window.
Gas emergency service. We've got a gas leak. They'll be here soon. No!
Even a spark from a light switch turned on or off, for example, can ignite escaping gas. For the important do's and don'ts of gas safety, see our advertisement in many daily and Sunday newspapers. It could save your life. British Gas, caring for your safety.
On Friday, an appointment at the barber's. This England goes down memory lane, back to the years of hair cream, clippers, and cutthroats. Today, the much-despised short back and sides and the ancient skills of the traditional barber are back in demand. On Friday at 10:30, This England discovers the humour and character of the gentleman's hairdresser, which can still be found in the back streets of the Northwest.
All right, sir, anything for the weekend?
A reminder to our younger viewers that Just for Fun is about to start over on Channel 4. Here on Granada, we shall catch up with worldwide events with the national news at 12:30.
The news at 12:30 with John Suchet.
After that row, the cricket tour looks certain to be called off. Prince Harry face to face with the cameras.
Hello from Washington. A new era of East-West harmony. Mr. Gorbachev says winter is on the wane. From Mr. Reagan, it's goodwill and hope for the future. It's back to the negotiating table today for Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev. The drama of the treaty signing behind them, the two men will be getting down to the serious business of this summit, the move towards slashing the huge arsenals of long-range strategic nuclear missiles. The warm atmosphere between the two men was demonstrated at a glittering dinner at the White House last night when they toasted each other in champagne.
Mikhail Gorbachev's armored-plated Russian limousine swept him to the door of the White House for a state banquet with the Reagans, the President and First Lady greeting the couple from Moscow almost like old friends. Yet only last week, a White House spokesman described this summit as a meeting of old enemies.
Mr. President, are these old enemies becoming new friends?
They've signed an arms deal, but they still disagree on dress, the Soviet leader shunning the capitalist formality of the black tie and sticking instead to a plain business suit. The mood was certainly relaxed enough, reflecting the optimism that now surrounds their talks. Mr. Reagan's Chief of Staff, Howard Baker, gave American television viewers some insight into the atmosphere of those discussions.
They engaged in a fair amount of good-natured banter and a good amount of give and take on serious issues.
What was the difference between Mr. Gorbachev as you imagined him and as you saw him?
Gorbachev was more spontaneous than I thought he would be. He clearly is better briefed than almost any world leader that I've ever been exposed to. He's good.
At the White House banquet, it was a time for celebrating what's been achieved so far and looking to the future.
Already, by virtue of hard work and hard bargaining, we've accomplished much, and our negotiators deserve great credit. But we cannot afford to rest. There's more work to be done, and time and history are marching on. So I offer a toast, a commitment on behalf of the American people of seriousness, goodwill, and hope for the future. General Secretary and Mrs. Gorbachev, to your health. Vasha Zdarovya.
Mr. Gorbachev said the winter of discontent between America and Russia was on the wane, and he offered a toast to peace and prosperity for both countries.
The goal we're setting today is to build a nuclear-free world. The road leading to it is difficult and thorny, but with new thinking, it is attainable.
And the first round of summitry ended with a Russian folk song, the Gorbachevs and the Reagans joining in together, the picture of East-West harmony. The ceremonial's over for now. It'll be strictly business here today, and it won't just be arms control. Afghanistan is high on the agenda, with Ronald Reagan anxious to know when Mikhail Gorbachev intends to pull out his troops. Tim Ewart, ITN, at the White House.
Mr. Gorbachev will brief Warsaw Pact leaders on the summit on his way back to Moscow. They'll meet in East Berlin on Friday. Meanwhile, tonight, it's the Gorbachevs' turn to play host to the Reagans at the Soviet embassy. It's all part of the great public relations display that both sides are putting on. The Soviet leader has already shown America how good he is at this. Last night, under the glare of the television lights, he sold his message on Perestroika and glasnost, restructuring and openness, to an invited audience that read like a who's who of Washington.
If you weren't at the White House last night, then the place to be was here, Moscow's embassy on Washington's 16th Street. Gorby, as the Americans have dubbed him, holding court beyond the white tulips on the philosophy that lies behind Perestroika, the new reforms. American intellectuals, socialites, actors gathered in a room listening to an animated lecture on the need for change in the party, in the economy, curbs on conservatives, yet warnings that there must be no adventurism, a hint of a reference to downgraded Moscow party boss Boris Yeltsin. Chapter 2 of the taking of America by storm by the Kremlin's first family. The audience had been spellbound, and afterwards they literally clambered over each other to try to talk to him. Ever seen Yoko Ono less than center stage? Or Henry Kissinger, the great hawk, the doubter of Kremlin integrity, positively melting? Or Billy Graham, the evangelist, getting Soviet star treatment. Paul Newman in a walk-on part, and the General Secretary getting an American bear hug. Anthropologically, a fascinating evening. Whether this meeting of minds could be underpinned with real strides in global security, that may well depend on this man, Marshal Akrameyev, last night seen leaving the American State Department. He's the boss of the Soviet armed forces. Whether an agreement to slash strategic missiles and more can become a treaty hangs heavily upon his decisions. A historic first-ever discussion is planned later today with his American opposite number at the Pentagon, the hot seat of the American military might. Another measure of the way things are going here, overnight the two leaders decided to drop their official titles when meeting alone. From now on it's to be Ron and Mikhail. And the subjects they'll discuss in 3 hours' time when they meet again: Afghanistan and the Gulf, raised by the Americans; Central America and South Africa, raised by the Russians. Jon Snow, ITN, Washington.
Well, one person who did get that coveted invitation to the White House dinner is America's former ambassador to the United Nations, Jean Kirkpatrick. She's known as a staunch Reagan supporter, but she's also a fierce anti-communist. So I was interested to find out how she feels about the president's new role as Reagan the peacemaker.
Is it not rather ironic that President Reagan, who has been really viewed as a hawk,
should be about to go down in history as something of a dove.
Well, I don't think those terms are very useful. I think Ronald Reagan has been a realist, and that realism almost always pays. That's what I think about it. The INF Treaty is a small step. It's not a huge step, and it doesn't solve outstanding problems of Western security or East-West relations, but it's a significant step.
Looking ahead to the next stage, the efforts to get reductions in strategic arms, Mrs. Thatcher is known to be extremely dubious about this and unwilling to envisage anything more than, say, a 50% cut. Do you think she's right to be cautious?
Well, I personally very much hope that the President will first have a summit with our principal Allied leaders in advance of a next summit with Gorbachev, and that there will be there a full discussion of Allied perspectives, of British and French and German, Dutch and so forth, perspectives on European security and Allied security, in order to be absolutely sure that these are taken fully into account.
How much of a role will Mrs. Thatcher play in all that?
Oh, Mrs. Thatcher is, of course, a head of state who enjoys a very special relationship with Ronald Reagan and vice versa. It is inconceivable that there would be any Allied consultations in which Mrs. Thatcher did not play a major role, central role even.
But in the final analysis, if he wanted to move further than she did on strategic arms reduction, he would, wouldn't he?
Well, I believe that he will do his best to take into account the sort of comprehensive Allied concerns. Naturally, finally, he follows his own judgment. Of course, everybody does.
Well, while President Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev are meeting this morning, their wives have their one and only private get-together. Nancy Reagan will take Raisa Gorbachev on a tour of the White House. No doubt it'll be all smiles, but it's widely believed that there's no love lost between the strong-minded and glamorous First Ladies.
When pianist Van Cliburn serenaded Raisa Gorbachev at a White House reception last night, Mrs. Reagan didn't exactly join in the sing-along, doing nothing to quell rumors that the world's most powerful First Ladies don't exactly hit it off. The last time the pair were together in Geneva in 1985, Mrs. Reagan was said to have been infuriated at hearing lectures on socialism from Mrs. Gorbachev, who, to no one else's surprise, turned out to be an enthusiastic communist.
Raisa rabbited on the sort of Marxist line to Nancy, who was absolutely flabbergasted. She'd been expecting to talk about, you know, drugs or children or one of the usual Nancy Reagan topics. And I think it just sucked her breath right out of her body.
At Reykjavik, with no competition, Mrs. Gorbachev wowed the press. She was glamorous, good-humoured, and well-educated. There never has been a First Lady of Russia like Raisa. Previous First Ladies have been, well, rather less fashion-conscious and socially almost invisible. Mrs. Khrushchev and Mrs. Brezhnev played virtually no public role, were almost unknown outside Russia, and no one even knew there was a Mrs. Andropov until she turned up at his funeral. By contrast, Mrs. Gorbachev is constantly at her husband's side. He's even admitted he discusses affairs of state with her. This has brought much criticism at home, but it's won her praise abroad. Even so, on this visit, she's keeping a noticeably lower profile. At an embassy reception last night, she told a questioner, "I don't exaggerate my role. It's common sense not to." For the moment, the Washington gossips are still trying to find out whether the ice has melted between the two First Ladies. They meet again for tea and talks. Nancy is said to be hoping not to receive another lecture on Marxism. Ken Rees, ITN, Washington.
Well, that's it from us for the moment. Now back to John Suchet in London.
Well, from here in London, the big story is that the England cricket tour of Pakistan looks certain to be called off after some of the most controversial scenes ever seen in a test series. Last-minute talks are now going on to try to save the tour, and riot police are outside the ground in Faisalabad. If the England players do come home, it'll be the first time that that has happened in 111 years. When Mike Gatting led his side onto the pitch this morning, the umpires refused to take to the field, demanding an apology for yesterday's furious row. The England team say the umpires should apologise too. Britain's ambassador to Pakistan has urged England team officials to tread carefully.
There were extraordinary scenes here as Mike Gatting led his team out to the middle. There were no umpires and no batsmen. It was only a gesture. The players knew the match wouldn't continue, and probably the tour was doomed. Graham Gooch put an arm round the shoulder of the man whose 2 outbursts yesterday had led to the total impasse. The Pakistanis and Rana are furious at Gatting's behaviour. The Times of Pakistan says he should be sacked as captain and the team sent home immediately. Certainly, whatever the provocation, it was an extraordinary public outburst by the captain of an English team. All day, talks went on between the English management and the Pakistanis. Rana wouldn't umpire if there was no apology from Gatting. Gatting would only apologise if Rana would apologise too for saying he had played unfairly. Deadlock. The manager, Peter Lush, went to his hotel to phone the TCCB at Lord's. He said the team was ready to play, so were the Pakistanis. They'd stay until the scheduled close of play. But it does seem inconceivable this match, or indeed the tour, can continue. The implications for cricket worldwide are immense. Gatting's position as captain must be in question, and the pressure for neutral umpires in all tests is now intense. Giles Smith, ITN Sport, Faisalabad.
Today at Lord's, Cricket Board officials were making urgent contact with Pakistan to get the latest information. A meeting of the Cricket Council is being held this afternoon and a full meeting of the Test and County Cricket Board tomorrow. This morning, Chief Executive Alan Smith refused to condemn or condone Gatting, but warned that the situation was very serious.
I think it's an extremely difficult situation. I think it's a very regrettable situation. I mean, we're all very saddened here. Regardless of the rights and wrongs of the situation, the game has been ill-served. And one would hope from afar, and it's very difficult 5,000 or 6,000 miles away to say this should happen, that should happen. One very much earnestly hopes that a solution can be found. It is certainly something that has developed into very serious proportions, and I think it's got to be sorted out for the good of the game.
Officials here are clearly hoping the crisis can be sorted out in Pakistan without them intervening. If it can't, they would have no option but to call the England team home early. Not since Douglas Jardine's controversial bodyline tour to Australia more than 50 years ago have relations between 2 test-playing sides reached such a low ebb. Jardine's tactics of intimidatory bowling caused that row. It led to questions in both parliaments. This controversy is about umpires. There have been a series of clashes and it's bound to fuel calls for neutral officials. But England's top umpire sees problems in that.
You would have to select the best 6 umpires in the world, whether they came from Timbuktu or the North Pole. And my feeling is it would cost a tremendous amount of money, and you would have to pay this select 6 umpires the same amount of money that you pay in the players, and also they'd have to have all the perks that the players are getting.
All right, well, at the moment, though, Lord's is concentrating on saving the tour. Mark Austin, ITN Sport, Lord's.
Campaigners for arthritis sufferers who claim they were made worse when they took the drug Oprin say they've been offered a miserly sum in compensation. The offer from the American pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly has not been disclosed, but is said to be about £2,000 each.
So after what Mr. Justice Hurst described as intense and prolonged negotiations, a deal has been done, an offer has been made and accepted by lawyers on all sides. But it's an offer publicly not yet revealed, an offer still sub judice, but an offer described by various activists and MPs today as microscopic, a disgrace.
Well, the good news is that finally this company, after exploiting every possible weakness in the British system, have made an offer. The bad news is it's the minimum offer they can get away with. And I think really what's happened here is that the law has reached the right conclusion, but justice is not really being done.
And if it turns out that these people who are disabled are receiving less than the lawyers who fought in court, then there would be public and parliamentary outrage.
I think the situation is despicable, it is insulting, but it is totally legal. The tragedy is that the defendants have been able to use our legal system to their advantage. I had hoped that one day I would know the happiness of announcing a proposal of settlement for Oprin victims that was not only fair and reasonable, but also was compassionate. I regret this cannot be.
This agreement is acceptable to the company. We certainly think it's better than continuing with lengthy and probably costly litigation.
But isn't it the length of these proceedings? Hasn't it largely been down to Lily being somewhat obstructive?
No, certainly not.
So why has it taken so long?
I think that's all I can say at the moment, I'm afraid.
So this does look like the beginning of the end of the Oprin affair, but the dawn of a new campaign to change the law on compensation. Vernon Mann, ITN, at the High Court.
At the Old Bailey, the appeal of 6 Irishmen against life sentences for the Birmingham pub bombings in which 21 people died has ended, but the judges will not give their verdicts until the new year. The 6 men claimed they'd confessed only after being beaten up, and they challenged forensic evidence. Abroad again now. In Ethiopia, thousands are migrating from the famine-stricken north to seek new homes in more fertile areas to the south. Some are trekking on foot, others are in government lorries to escape another famine after the failure of the rains.
A day-long trek that began at dawn, an attempt to assess the vulnerability of the villages across the mountains rarely visited by relief organizations.
God, look at that.
Through a harsh but beautiful environment, we followed the same route the villagers take when they walk out of the valley to collect their monthly rations at Muja Robit, passing deserted villages, a memorial to those who died in the last famine. Arriving at the village of Banat was the closest we had come to the epicenter of Ethiopia's famine. Asmamaw Desra's story all too familiar. 3 days ago, he exhausted his food supply. Only the government handouts across the mountains are keeping his family and the village alive. It's only by traveling on foot into the most inaccessible regions of the country that you're able to determine the scale of the pending famine. From talking to local farmers, it's clear that the worst fears of the aid agencies about the extent of the disaster facing Ethiopia are justified. These are proud people. Most would prefer to die in Banat than move to government resettlement villages.
As soon as we got to this village, one of the guys said that he'd been to Matema, and he said that's where life is, but I was born here. And I took that to imply that he'd die here, and when I asked him would he die here, he said yes.
We have yet to measure the famine in the numbers of those who died, but the destruction of whole communities has already begun. Peter Sharp, ITN, in northern Ethiopia.
Here at home, Prince Harry followed a family tradition this morning and made his stage debut. He arrived for his school Christmas play dressed as a pixie and immediately showed off his somewhat impish nature. This from Joan Thurkettle.
When it comes to dealing with the press, Prince Harry has a style all of his own. The Princess of Wales unsuccessfully tried to hide her amusement before leading him off into school. Away from prying eyes, the young prince and his classmates were getting ready for the annual nativity play. It was thought that he might play one of the 3 kings, but not a bit of it. As the crocodile of children crossed the road to the hall where the play was to be performed, out came Harry, not as a king, a shepherd, or an angel, but a pixie, dressed from head to foot in red and green, and this time on his best behaviour. Soon after, the Princess of Wales was back, accompanied by her husband, to watch the performance. An hour later, it was all over. The Prince and Princess thanked the headmistress, and young Harry, in his unlikely outfit, but plainly enjoying all the attention, went back to school. Joan Thurkettle, ITN, in Kensington.
It's been a quiet morning in the city, with the FT100 index up only 7.5 and the dollar down almost a cent against the pound. Back now to Julia Somerville in Washington.
Well, for the 3rd successive day, we've got a crisp, sunny morning here in Washington. President Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev meet face-to-face this morning, and Nancy shows Raisa around the White House. After lunch with George Shultz at the State Department, Mr. Gorbachev meets American publishers and editors. Then it's the Gorbachevs' turn to host the Reagans at dinner at the Soviet Embassy tonight. We'll have full club coverage of that glittering occasion in the 12:30 news tomorrow. Now back to you, John.
Julia Somerville. A look at the weather here, and frost has hit racing again with the meetings at Haydock and Huntingdon abandoned today. It'll stay cold, but most areas should be bright and sunny, apart from East Anglia and the southeast coast, where there could be wintry showers, and northern Scotland, where there will be rain at times. Just the main news from here again. Talks are continuing in Pakistan to try and save the England cricket tour after the row yesterday between the captain, Mike Gatting, and the umpire. That's the news at 12:30. Until tomorrow, goodbye.
In a few moments, wedding plans are about to be made at Falcon Crest.
Welcome back. The latest news. A policeman has been shot during a siege in North Wales. It happened after a man armed with a shotgun had barricaded himself in a house in Old Colwyn. The latest news, Christine Ruth is on the line from Colwyn Bay. Hello, Christine.
Hello there, Bob. From where I'm standing, I'm looking down on the cul-de-sac where the gunman has been taking pot shots at the police all morning. Shortly before midday, he fired at a police marksman. 3 pellets hit him in the face, and he was taken by ambulance to Bodelwyddan Hospital. He's not thought to be seriously hurt. The siege has been going on since 5 o'clock yesterday evening, when the gunman's girlfriend ran screaming from the house and he fired after her. He's believed to be 24-year-old Wayne Chester. The terraced house he's holed up in belongs to his parents. The whole street has been evacuated, and a North Wales police negotiator is at the scene communicating with Chester on a loud hailer. It's understood the gunman may have been sniffing glue. 5 shots have been fired since the beginning of the siege, and Chester apparently has a considerable amount of ammunition in the house. So there's no telling, Bob, when the siege will end.
I think that's it. Thank you, Christine. Thank you indeed. We'll keep you posted on that story later, of course. And in Manchester, police are hunting for the brutal killer of an 87-year-old woman. The body of Elsie Torr was found at her home on Irwood Road in Burnage. She'd been stabbed more than 30 times in a frenzied attack. Police chiefs say they're shocked by the incident, and they've set up a special hotline number for anyone with information. The number to ring is 061 from outside Manchester, 855 3338. That number, 061 855 3338. And police are warning pensioners in Manchester to keep their doors well bolted. The Moors murderer Ian Brady is back in Park Lane Top Security Hospital on Merseyside this morning after a long day on the moors above Saddleworth. He was taken back to the moor by Detective Chief Superintendent Peter Topping to help check if he'd covered all the ground necessary in the search for the grave of 12-year-old Keith Bennett. Jeff Wood is on the moor.
24 hours after Ian Brady's second escorted visit to Saddleworth Moor, there was no sign of any renewed police activity. The area around Shiny Brook, where Brady spent a full day trying to pinpoint the grave of schoolboy Keith Bennett, was deserted. The ground on the moor is still frozen hard after the temperature dipped to -5 overnight. Police have stated they have no plans to return to attempt more digging, and at this stage it seems highly unlikely that a fresh sweep of the moors would bring any significant results.
However, it's been revealed today that Brady thinks he has found the grave of Keith Bennett. He gave the news to his solicitor Benedict Bernberg after returning to Park Lane Hospital last night.
What is there in the future? Do you expect to talk to Brady?
Well, Mr. Brady says that he asked Mr. Topping in the van on the way back to the hospital last night what the next move was, and Mr. Topping said that obviously with icy conditions now was not the time. The weather was too inclement. And Mr. Brady certainly hopes that he will resume the search as soon as the weather conditions permit.
About 500 nurses on Merseyside are expected to be asked to vote for industrial action tonight to fight government plans to cut their pay. Health service unions have called for a mass meeting at Fazakerley Hospital to launch a campaign against plans to axe night and weekend allowances in favour of a flat rate payment. They say this would mean night nurses would lose £100 a month. Merseyside's 2 Euro MPs will today visit some of their constituents being held in jail in Belgium. Ken Stewart and Les Huckfield have campaigned for months for the right to see 11 of the Liverpool football fans who are in custody awaiting trial on charges arising from the Heysel Stadium riot. The visit is scheduled to take place at Louvain Jail near Brussels this afternoon. A prison governor's wife who struck up friendships with some of the hardened criminals in her husband's care has remembered the men in her will. Mrs. Mary Coombs, who was 80, left £10,000 when she died in February. Her husband, Michael, was a former assistant governor at Strangeways Jail, Manchester, and Hindley Borstal, near Wigan. Newpie is to step up its fight, to block ward closures at the Myler District Hospital in Wrexham. Clwyd Health Authority plans to implement economies next week, starting with the shutdown of one ward after overspending by £400,000. Move to sport now, and cricket. Well, they're not playing out in Pakistan, but Lancashire members have been told that a subcommittee is investigating the administration of the club's affairs. Among the investigators is barrister James Pickup, who was one of a group of members pressing for an inquiry earlier this year. Chairman Bob Bennett was re-elected at last night's annual meeting, but the controversial Cheshire millionaire Tim Hudson failed to get onto the committee. I'm just moving to another story I've been asked to read to you, and I'm just about to find it, yes. A man charged with stealing a bus full of football supporters has been remanded in his absence by Liverpool magistrates. Anthony Rimmer, who's 30, of Melbury Road, Huyton, was remanded to appear on January the 13th. It's alleged that he stole the bus last October. Now the weather. Well, I think you can probably guess, but I'm going to tell you what we've got. It's going to stay very cold, but sunny and dry, which is quite nice for most of the region. Temperatures rising to, you're going to freeze at this, only 4 centigrade, not quite freeze. That's 39 Fahrenheit. We'll be back with you later this afternoon.
Over on Channel 4 in a few moments, you can join the Muppets and their friends up on the roof at night in Sesame Street. Next, here on Granada, it's Falcon Crest.
Shall I put the coffee on?
Wear what you like, but make me a lovely cup of Nescafé.
So, what's your impression of that,
There's only one Nescafé, specially blended and perfectly roasted for that richer, smoother taste.
Now, that's something no one can imitate.
Nescafé, coffee at its best.
Nescafé always gets top marks.
Watch out! Beadle's about to invite you to my family pantomime Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at the Tameside Theatre. Opens Christmas Eve, seats from £2.50 and lots of surprises.
I say, old boy, isn't it ready yet? 3 months adrift, with you the missing link. Why are you so slow?
If you have to choose between saving your skin and saving your bacon, just ask yourself, is it Danepak's tasty rindeless bacon in the new, easy-to-open, easy-to-close pack?
Do wish you'd get a move on. Haven't had a decent blowout for weeks.
Danepak, it's the only choice.
Presenting the TOMY Time Play Computer. Play Computer. Program a picture, program the word, and make the picture move. Play Computer with 13 pictures and words to learn. Thank you, Professor. TOMY Time fun goes on and on.
Who took the wire out of underwire bras? Wow. Who shapes you with gentle comfort flex instead of wire? Wow. And now, who has matching lace lingerie? Wow. Who makes you look terrific? Wow. From Playtex, where beautiful new ideas take shape.
Starting Sunday at 7:15, North and South Book 2.
God, the whole world's gone insane, George.
The saga continues.
I know you want me.
I want you more than any woman I've ever known.
Your wife is from South Carolina?
That's right.
You're a damn rebel lover.
I arrest you in the name of the Confederate States of America.
You should have turned me into your Yankee troops.
God, what has happened to us?
North and South Book 2, starting Sunday at 7:15, continuing Monday and Tuesday at 9 on ITV.
Now on Granada on Oh Holy Alliances in Falcon Crest.